Hey y'all, welcome. I'm so excited that you're joining me today. We are going to talk about a real life Cinderella story, and it is found right here in our Bible. It is the story of our sweet friend Ruth. And when Ruth was alive, the world was full of sin and darkness and evil and chaos and wickedness, and people totally hurt each other, and they didn't even care. It was so bad. And there was also a famine going on. So there was no food. They couldn't grow any crops. There was nothing that they could find to eat. And there was a girl named Naomi who lived in Judah and Bethlehem. And the area of Judah and Bethlehem was very special to God. And she married a guy, and they had 2 sons together. And they were hungry. So the dad decided that they should move to Moab. And Moab was about 50 miles away, and it would have taken about 7 days to get there. And they had to cross rivers and everything to get to Moab. And when they got to Moab, Naomi's 2 sons, they found these girls, and they were like, whoa, they're pretty cool. And they decided to marry them. So they married Ruth and Orpah when they lived in the land of Moab. And they were still hungry though. There was no food, and there was a famine. And over time, all of the boys, they totally died. So it was Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah left, living in the land of Moab together. And Naomi had heard some gossip that there was blessing being poured out in the land of Judah, that rain had come, and that people were getting crops again, and that would mean they could have food. So Naomi had decided that she was going to ditch Moab and go back to Judah. But she told Orpah and Ruth that they should go back to their own families because she didn't have any sons for them anymore. So Naomi and the girls, they hugged and they cried because they were so sad. They didn't want to leave each other. They loved each other so much. And Orpah finally said, okay, I'll go back home. So she left, and Ruth and Naomi watched as she left, and her name actually means back of neck. So that kind of makes sense because that was the last thing that Ruth and Naomi saw when she left and went back to live with her parents. But Ruth did not want to leave, and she cried out to Naomi, no, don't ask me to leave. I won't turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God is my God. And that also makes sense because her name means friendly companion. And she was a friendly companion too, sweet Naomi. She loved God, and she loved Naomi. So Naomi and Ruth traveled all the way back. They crossed the rivers together, and they went back to the land of Judah, hoping that they could find food. So Ruth and Naomi made it back to Judah and Bethlehem just in time for the barley harvest. That means they were going to have food. Score! There was a rule of society that said that the farmers, when they harvested their fields, they had to leave anything that dropped along the edges for the poor and hungry to be able to gather and eat. That is a really super awesome rule because then everyone would have food to eat. Enter Boaz. Boaz was a wealthy, influential man of the community, and he was doing pretty well and was very blessed. So he had lots of those good leftovers for people to eat. And Ruth and Naomi just happened to land in an area near Boaz's fields so that they could gather some of the food and eat as well. They had no idea it was Boaz's fields that they were gathering from as Ruth went out to gather some of those delicious leftovers. But God knew. Boaz stopped by to check on his fields, and he saw Ruth glowing in sweaty, dirt-filled beauty. And he asked one of his workers, "Hey, who's that girl?" The field worker reported to Boaz that she was a super hard worker and that she was from Moab, and she arrived with Naomi. He even told Boaz that she works so hard she barely stops to rest for even a few minutes. So she's not only beautifully messy, she's also a crazy hard worker. He's like, whoa. He decided to go ahead and talk to her.
Hey, why don't you stay and collect grain from my field?
So he wanted to make sure she was protected and taken care of. And he even told all his workers to be super nice to her. And he gives her an unlimited supply of water, too. She gushes in overwhelming thanks and gratitude. And she tells him she does not deserve this kind of kindness and care. He assures her that all is well and that he has seen her sweet kindness and that she is a blessing to others. And then he even prays a blessing over her. He says, "May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." Then they have their first date. He invites her to eat lunch with them, and they have a lunch date together. He offered her bread.
Would you like some bread?
Thank you. She ate all she wanted, and there was still food left over. After their date, Boaz tells his workers to drop extra grain on purpose so that she would have even more than she needed, so that she would have tons of extra food. He's so generous. He's smitten for this dirty, messy, hardworking sweetheart. Okay, so back then, things were a little bit different than they are today. And there was this other guy that had dibs on Ruth. So Boaz does the right thing because he wants to marry her and she kind of likes him too. So he turns around and he asks the guy, he went and met the guy and he's like, "Hey, are you interested in Ruth?" And he's like, "No, dude." So Boaz is he's gonna get the girl. The other guy, he's not interested. Booyah! He gets the girl. Boaz took care of Ruth and made sure she had all that she needed and more. He served her and he gave to her generously. And Jesus does the same thing for us. He pours out forgiveness and mercy and grace, and he gives us all the extra blessings, all because he loves us so much, even when we are dirty and gross. And he sees our worth and our value in who we are. He knows who we really are. And he wants us to choose him as Lord and Savior over our lives. And he doesn't want the other guy to get us. Ruth's story is even better than Cinderella because Ruth leads us to Jesus. Boaz rescued Ruth in Bethlehem and took care of her abundantly, and he gave her more than she ever needed. And he gave her unlimited water and bread. And Jesus left heaven and came to Bethlehem for us. And he rescues us forever by offering us his living water for all eternity. We don't deserve it, but he gave us it all because he loves us. He gave us his whole life, all because he loves us that much. And he wanted us to have an opportunity to choose him and to love him too. He is the bread of life, and he takes care of us for all eternity if we trust in him and love him with all of our hearts forever.